Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is going to be absolutely bonkers. Now, the data is in, and the United States government has decided to sue Warren Buffett and a company he owns called Vanderbilt for predatory lending. It's starting to look a lot like 2008 once again, and these banks, you guys, are lending on standards that do not exist, probably because they know and understand that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are just going to buy them whether or not they fall under qualified mortgage guidelines or not. And regardless, you guys, we're going to talk about that today in this video. But before I begin, happy Thursday morning. Mitch Vexler, is it light outside where you're at?
No, it is pitch dark and heavy cloud cover, and allegedly it is about to start snowing. So it's going to be a miserable day, and gave a few people the day off for obvious reasons, because here in Texas, when it starts snowing, people start driving into things. So best to stay away.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you on that, brother. You know, I really like getting up early like this to make these morning videos. If you find value in morning videos, you guys do us a favor, comment below. Don't forget to hit like right now, share this video. And regardless, you guys, we hope that you learn and enjoy. This came out yesterday, January 8th. This is titled U.S. Government Sues Warren Buffett's Berkshire-owned lending company for predatory mortgages. Lot to unpack here, guys. A lot of good topics on this just one article. A mortgage lender owned by Warren Buffett's holding company, Berkshire Hathaway, has been sued by the CFPB, which again, you guys, that's a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That came about through the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act as a result of the GFC global financial crisis. Now, the CFPB is alleging that the business pushed people into taking unaffordable loans. That's starting to sound a lot like 2002 to 2008. The January 6th lawsuit, and we'll open that lawsuit here in a minute, was filed against Tennessee-based Vanderbilt Mortgage and Finance in the U.S. District Court of Eastern District of Tennessee. The company provides loans for manufactured homes, also known as mobile homes. They're actually known as manufactured homes if they're post-1976 HUD. So they're not called mobile homes. Stop calling them mobile homes. Vanderbilt's business model ignored clear and obvious red flags that borrowers could not afford the loans. You guys, this is insane. The agency said in a statement. Now, as a result, many families found themselves struggling to make payments on basic life necessities. Vanderbilt charged many borrowers additional fees and penalties when their loans became delinquent, and some eventually lost their homes. They do not want these banks to foreclose on houses. I'm going to ask that question. We'll get to that subject here in a minute. This is interesting. Vanderbilt is a subsidiary of Clayton Homes. And this is why, Mitch, that these salesmen and these sales companies, builders, they can't own the finance company too. If you're selling the house and you own the financing as well, you're going to commit fraud. Case in point, Vanderbilt. I have many Clayton Homes around where I live. They're the largest builder of manufactured homes in the United States. Clayton is in turn a wholly owned subsidiary, I did not know that actually, of Berkshire Hathaway. Most homes financed by Vanderbilt are manufactured homes and sold by affiliated companies owned by Clayton. According to the agency, mobile homes are a vital source of affordable housing, especially for millions of low-income and older U.S. citizens. In July, the average sales price of a single section mobile home was $88,800, and as compared to the median sales price of a regular home, which was $414,500. In the complaint, the CFPB alleged that Vanderbilt manipulated lending standards when borrowers did not have enough income. And so what I'm going to do, you guys, first of all, is I wanted to show you and Mitch that if we go to the CFPB website, they are acknowledging that they did sue Vanderbilt right here. This came out January 6th. And the interesting thing is when I pull up the case documents right here, and it's about 10 pages, so this is not even long, I want to read you guys the first 5 bullet points here. And then we'll go back to Mitch, and then I want to read a few other things, which is very, very interesting. But here's the introduction. Manufactured homes, commonly known as mobile homes. Why do they have to throw mobile homes in there? I mean, it gets me so frustrated because I passed my test, and that was one that, and actually I've helped with manufactured homes a lot. And I used to live in a manufactured home as well. It felt like a single wide. My dad said it was a double wide, whatever. Are a vital source of affordable housing for millions of financially vulnerable, low-income Americans, many of whom are located in rural areas of the United States and lack access to affordable site-built homes for themselves and their family. Number 2, Vanderbilt is a manufactured home financing company that purports to provide access to affordable housing for this financially vulnerable population, but instead it saddled borrowers in the greatest need with mortgages that they couldn't reasonably afford. And this is very interesting how they did this. Vanderbilt's underwriting process ignored clear and obvious red flags that certain consumers would not be able to repay their loan according to their terms. Vanderbilt used implausible estimates of monthly expenses that meaningfully underestimated when consumers would need after paying their mortgage payments and other often significant monthly debt obligations in order to keep food on the table to meet other living expenses. So they're giving loans to people that can't afford it. Additionally, for some of these same consumers who lack sufficient monthly income to cover living expenses, Vanderbilt ignored that these consumers were currently struggling to satisfy their existing debt obligations, as demonstrated by one or more debts in collection on the consumer's credit reports that they lacked assets to repay these assets. Now, as a result, Vanderbilt originated loans where the company did not make a reasonable good faith determination on the consumer's ability to repay the loan as the law requires. Predictably, many of these consumers experienced late fees and penalties where their loans became delinquent and had their homes repossessed when their delinquent loans went into default. Mitch, I'm going to go into that here in a minute, and I'm going to show you exactly what they did as far as underwriting guidelines. Essentially, it appears that they didn't even use debt to income ratio because remember, in 2022, the CFPB removed debt to income ratio thresholds from qualified mortgages. So what they did in turn is use something called residual income. I'll go over that the next segment of this video. But my question to you, sir, is, okay, so we got a bank here, and we'll go into this in detail, that is writing bad loans to people that can't afford it, just like that happened in the past. But what's interesting, and here's my first question is, it appears even if they're doing this, or even if someone doesn't pay their mortgage, the CFPB is attacking lenders if they foreclose on houses. So that may be a large reason why there's so many loan modifications right now and not a lot of foreclosures. Mitch, do you see these government agencies attacking lenders and attacking professionals in the business if they don't allow someone to stay in their house? In other words, if someone's late on their mortgage payment, can the bank get sued for kicking them out? And is that appropriate?
It's a political trick, right? So you've seen this in Chicago, you've seen this in LA, where there's renters and say, well, okay, don't pay your rent and we'll make sure you stay in your house for the next year or two at the expense of the landlord, which ends up backing up on the banks. The reality is, and the answer to your question is yes, it is a trick. And it's an economic trick at the expense. So if you look at it and follow the chain, well, you have shareholders in the banks. So when the government says, well, don't throw these people out, they're not paying, they're not able to pay, one has to look at the circumstances of why they're not able to pay and what happened. There's plenty of blame to go around here. But let's start with the basis that, because as you were going through all this, I wrote a couple of things down. All I've said time and time again, all this nonsense can be fixed with one simple thing: median household income. If you know what the median household income is, there's your answer. If they can't afford it, then you shouldn't be selling them the home. It's real simple. Second step, if you're the bank, you hold the paper. You don't have the right to sell the paper. Clayton Homes, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the largest, if not the largest, mobile home, manufactured home producer, manufacturer in the world. They're huge. Yes. So then you get into what Jeremy Bagot was saying, which Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, well, they're instructing the appraisers, right, to hit the target. All of that can be fixed two things: median household income, you the banks, you wrote the loan, you hold the loan. Case closed, the CFPB can close its doors and go home. So plenty of blame to go around here. It's all stupid, right? Everybody's taking a position and ignoring what's happening with the actual person that bought the home. But if you think about it, the commission in this particular case on this one person, the commission to the person who sold this property, both the home and the lot, the commission alone is worth more than the person had in the bank. The person had negative 50 cents when all was said and done. Okay, what the hell?
Good point. Good point. So if the home is worth $300,000, the commission on a $300,000 house could be 30 grand. Think about that, guys. $30,000 commission. That's insane, Mitch. 6%, say 6% to the realtors, 3% to the lender, another 1% in fees. That's a 10% commission. That's freaking crazy, man.
There's problems everywhere, right? So you've got a manufacturer, let's say that they go to a developer, the developer develops the lot, developer sells the lot, they put the home on top of the lot, okay? There's plenty of money going through here. The problem is that are they committing fraud on the buyer? Probably not. The buyer insists, they walk in that door and they say, I want to buy this house, then they stretch, probably in violation of the laws, and they shouldn't be doing it. But all you got to do is look at two things. Can they afford it, which is the median household income? Look at the median household income versus what their income is. Verify it. Can they afford it? If the answer is yes, then it's on them. Caveat emptor, right? Buyer beware. However, if they can't afford it, and that would be rectified because the bank wouldn't, if the bank was forced to hold the paper, the bank wouldn't accept the paper if they knew that the buyer couldn't pay. Two things, zip, zing, boom, done, fixed.
They're doing a workaround at the buyer's expense, because what happened, Mitch, and I'm going to go to this part of the video now. So obviously the GFC happened, the global financial crisis. They're like, we can't ever let subprime loans take over the market again. So enter Dodd-Frank and qualified mortgages. Now, up until about, like I was saying, 2022, in the qualified mortgage guidelines, you had to go off of debt to income ratio thresholds, meaning there was a certain debt to income ratio. Mitch has said this, and I've said this all the time. There's a certain debt to income ratio. If you go over that debt to income ratio, the loan does not fall under QM, and you can get sued by the borrower for giving them a loan they can't afford. However, when they removed that language in 2022 out of qualified mortgage language, debt to income ratio, they removed it, and they then put the duty to determine affordability back into the lender's hand to determine whether or not they can have the loan. So they removed the biggest safeguard, and they essentially took the guidelines back to similar guidelines as 2007 and 2008. The only difference being is if they have to verify income with TRVs and things like that. So what they did, and I'm going to show you this here in a minute, is they didn't, according to how this reads, instead of doing debt to income ratio, they're using a new qualifying way to determine someone's ability to repay the loan that's completely made up. It's their own proprietary way to underwrite loans. So I'm like, how the hell can they do that and still sell the paper? And what they're doing is something called residual income calculations. Now, I've actually been a proponent, Mitch, to where I like residual income calculations because unlike debt to income ratio, it gives you an amount that the person has to have after their expenses. So after like taxes, food, electricity, they have to have a certain amount left over to be able to pay their bills. And the more they have in their family, like if they have 3 dependents, 4 dependents, 5 dependents, whatever it is, the more money they have to have left over to be able to pay their bills. That's a VA, veterans income underwriting guideline, residual income. The problem here is they were still underwriting loans where people had negative amount of residual income or only like 50 cents. When it comes to VA, you have to have, I believe with just one person, I think the residual income is $700 or $800. If you have 4 people in a family, it could be $2,000. We're going back to the lawsuit. I want to read a few of these. This is really, really crazy. In other words, it's just like, how do they get to this point again? All right, so starting at 14, in 2014, Vanderbilt developed a residual income model as part of its internal underwriting process. So it's its own model, and it's for internal underwriting. That's interesting. Now, again, here's why I normally like residual income, because debt to income ratio doesn't look at healthcare, food, gasoline. It doesn't even look at net income. It doesn't even look at taxes. That's why I like residual income. The model subtracts food, healthcare, gasoline, and utility expenses. Again, remember, debt to income ratio doesn't do that. Monthly recurring debt obligations and the monthly mortgage payment from the application's monthly income. Any positive amount left over after this calculation is considered the applicant's net residual income, and Vanderbilt evaluates it along with the applicant's assets, debts, and credit profile to determine the consumer's ability to repay. Remember, CYA to CIA, which is credit income assets. So CYA, you know what that stands for, CIA, not the Central Intelligence Agency, credit income assets. That's what you need to work on if you want to buy a house. The living expenses Vanderbilt uses in its residual income model are based on either the borrower's self-reported numbers, which is another word for stated, get it, stated, where the borrower self-reports $0 in living expenses or other nominal amounts below Vanderbilt's estimate. Interesting. Vanderbilt substitutes its own proprietary living expense estimates. That's wow. Did you guys, so who's underwriting the file? Is it the borrower or is it Vanderbilt? Interesting. Vanderbilt's living expense estimate relies on living expense figures based on family size that are unreasonable for a single borrower and increasingly unreasonable as borrower's family size grows. When estimating an applicant's living expense, Vanderbilt does not consider other borrower characteristics or geological variations in living expense. I'm only going to read number 25 here. You guys can come back just for the sake of the time of this video. But this was an interesting example. For example, Vanderbilt approved a mortgage for a single mother with 2 dependents, so that's a 3-person household, and a residual income of negative 50 cents based on Vanderbilt's unreasonably low monthly living expenses. Based on Vanderbilt's unreasonably low monthly living expense estimate for that family, the borrower had 9 debts in collection and no additional assets. The borrower failed to make a regular mortgage payment 4 months after the mortgage was originated, and eventually Vanderbilt sent the loan to collection. So we got a government that does not want these banks to foreclose on anyone's houses. If you foreclose on someone's house and you're a bank, you're going to get sued, which might be good, actually. But then you also have the banks appearing to just cut corners, do whatever they want. And this is why, and I know we want to deregulate because we want companies to fail. But on the other hand, it's just like when you deregulate the regulations where those regulations were specifically designed to help consumers, I don't understand it. They said you can't go over a certain debt to income ratio. I believe that was 36. Then it went up to 43, and then they removed it. And now it appears they're doing stated type loans again, Mitch. What do you make of what they're doing? And do you see that as a similar situation to what was going on from 2002 to 2008 in regards to subprime lending?
You mean like Wells Fargo creating millions of fake accounts? You mean like the auto subprime loans, the housing subprime loans? You mean all that stuff? How could that possibly be happening today? Of course it's happening. It's right now. It's live. These things are repeating themselves because these entities do not hold the paper. Make them hold the paper. You write a loan, you own it. It'll fix it immediately. They won't be doing this. So the guy over who's selling the house, he's just saying, looking, well, I'm going to get a commission on this. Okay, well, you made a statement that it affects the public, but it actually affects the shareholders. So not only is mom and pop in this particular case getting hurt because they don't have the money to buy the house in the first place and nobody's telling them that or working with them, although caveat emptor, they're supposed to be doing their job too, right? They're not supposed to be getting into trouble. So, but if you're a shareholder in Clayton or a shareholder in Vanderbilt, the money's going to be paid here. They're going to lose. They're going to make a settlement, and that settlement's going to come out of the shareholder's pocket. So everybody that's touched this thing, that's why I said, the reality is that anybody who's touched this is going to lose. Shareholders are going to lose. Corporation is going to lose. Vanderbilt is going to lose. CFPB is going to, I mean, if I was on the other side, I could make them look like a monkey. So, you know, they're saying, well, it's mobile homes and manufactured homes. Listen, it's a home. It doesn't matter. If it's a stick-built home, mobile home, manufactured home, it's somebody's house. If they don't hold the paper on it and you're setting them up to default, you got a problem. So I'm not blaming the CFPB. I get it. But, you know, when you started saying, well, this poor person, that, and this manufactured or this mobile home, they're trying to paint a picture. And I could run a freight train over that. So the point of the matter is everybody has skin in this game, also has blame on their table. And it can be fixed for the long haul. Just make them hold the paper. Done. And it has nothing to do with the government. It's a private entity. They put the money up. They're the investors. End of story.
If you guys don't understand what Mitch is saying by holding the paper, these banks, these mortgage banks, remember I worked for like 22 years or something crazy like that. But these banks, when they lend you money, like if they were to give me a mortgage, they package that up, get their fees, they get their commission, and then they sell the loan for more fees and more commission to a company like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which essentially is backstopped by the Federal Reserve. So if they have to hold their paper, then they will not take as many risk. But my thing is, they don't have to hold their paper, Mitch. And what it seems that the Federal Reserve is doing, and this will go into our next segment here, but it seems like the Federal Reserve is just allowing the whole Fed put to go on. It seems like banks aren't allowed to fail. Like we're not allowed to go into foreclosure. Well, the Fed's saying, well, banks aren't allowed to fail. Well, if banks aren't allowed to fail, then what's to stop banks from cutting corners to make profits?
Well, you're right back to the mortgage-backed securities, right? What do they care? The banks are getting a commission. I mean, if you walk into a bank and say, I want to get a loan, so you get some yutz who says, okay, fine, let's write the paper up. Well, that yutz gets a commission. What's to separate him from a used car salesman? The answer is nothing. Then the bank up the stream says, okay, we've got a portfolio that this yutz put together. Let's sell the portfolio, or we'll cut it 1,000 different ways, like a line of cocaine, and simply say, we're going to call this mortgage-backed securities and sell it off to the market. We'll get a little bit more money. That's right where we are. We're right back to 2007. You've got mortgage-backed securities problems, mom and pop. So the investors in these mortgage-backed securities, let's say that for the sake of conversation, I'm not saying this happened, but just tossing a name out. Let's just say that Morgan Stanley, who represents pensions or 401k, says, yeah, we need some mortgage-backed securities to average out our portfolio. Well, okay, mortgage-backed securities and what? Do you really want to go foreclose on a 5-year-old, 1-year-old mobile home? See, the investors don't even know what the hell they're invested in. People, the pensions, the 401ks, they look at it and say, well, it's a portfolio, because so much money is out there sloshing around. They haven't got a clue where it's all going. We had one lady just from the video from yesterday or the day before say, well, okay, but I've got my money in a 401k. What do I do? Find out where the hell, follow it through. Where's your money? Just because you've got it in a 401k doesn't mean anything. Where is it? Is it in mortgage-backed securities, credit default obligations, credit default loans? Where the hell's your money? See, and that's the problem. When I said this doesn't just affect the homeowner, this affects every single person that's touched this entire file. Everybody's going to get shafted here. Now, take that number and multiply that across the United States. Right. Serious money.
It's a systemic problem. I mean, it seems like Ben Bernanke was a total loser, that the economy, he's tried to turn into a Keynesian type of economy. And now our home values are now entangled in pensions. So great job, Ben Bernanke, for doing that. So we can't just have a decline in home prices now, because there's so many things systemically that are hinged on the value of our homes, including ISDs. How did that happen? That's right. School districts are literally bankrupt, and if the values of our houses go down, they are so much worse off than they already are, and they're already bankrupt. So what happens when that happens on top of them being bankrupt? I apologize. Let's finish out this article. The company said its underwriting process. Okay, you ready for this, Mitch? Okay. These guys are so clowns. The company said its underwriting process exceed the legal requirements for assessing a borrower's ability to repay the loan. Well, that's interesting, because they just showed a net residual income of a loss, and they still underwrote and approved the loan. So and they're getting sued by the CFPB. So I don't know that that statement's true, and goes further by taking the greater of the borrower's actual reported expenses or an estimated living expense for the family size. Vanderbilt alleged that the CFPB only scrutinized a tiny portion of loans made, which was less than 0.8% over a 6 period of time. Oh, so you only heard a little bit of people? Cool. Despite previously endorsing Vanderbilt, the federal agency is now demanding compliance with an unknown and unknowable new new standard not addressed in law, which ultimately impacts creditworthy borrowers from owning a home. And this goes on. This is interesting. This is going to go on now to Doge. Under the Doge radar, over the past months, the CFPB has taken action against multiple companies for allegedly engaging in practices that harm consumers or violate law. Last month, the agency filed suit against Rocket Mortgage, and here it is right here. So they did file suit against a Rocket Mortgage for a legal kickback scheme to steer borrowers to Rocket Mortgage. When are they going to go after the new home builders for steering buyers to their lenders that are offering crazy incentives? When are they going to do that? CFPB, wake up and start doing your job. You're useless. And according to Musk right here, delete the CFPB. There are too many duplicative regulatory agencies. So, Mitch, I guess my question here is, it's going to be, should we shut down the CFPB? And I already know your answer, but let me just throw this into the fire real quick. The CFPB, the consumer protection, the key word is the protection part, right? They're not protecting the consumer. The CFPB allowed qualified mortgages to turn into trash loans again. If they're not adhering to debt to income ratio, then what? Then the law doesn't even matter. Mitch, all they're doing, and we've proven this to the viewers, the CFPB, when a lot of banks get into trouble, they just change the law to protect the banks. They don't change the law to protect the consumers. So is the CFPB just another political hack job that's an illusion of consumer protection, and should it be shut down?
Yes, and the same statement can be said for the Federal Reserve. Think of it this way. The Federal Reserve says, well, we're going to lower interest rates to stimulate the economy, and we're worried about inflation. Those two things can't even be on the same plane at the same time, but that's what's coming out of their mouth. Then the market runs the cost of interest rates up with the idea, okay, we don't trust the Federal Reserve. Well, the Federal Reserve has already proven that they should be shut down, never mind the 50 bullet points that I wrote that you've got the article on. Okay. Now you've got the CFPB. And by the way, there is a stitch of truth as far as on their side of the table. I mean, these things have happened. But what's really going on here, other than the political sniping in the public, well, what's really going on is a shakedown. Because Vanderbilt will probably end up writing a check and say, okay, fine, on this 0.08, and they'll go through this machination for the next year. So they'll be sniping back and forth, wasting the public's time. As I said, this is really simple to fix. All you got to do is say, hold the loans. Okay, the second you say these are your loans, you can't move them off, you can't sell them in the public. You made a loan, you get a rate of return on your loan. If somebody defaults, a borrower on your loan defaults, you go and take your own home back. Okay, that's the way it should be. All these other machinations are because you've got the left hand of the government not knowing what the right hand of the government is doing. Federal Reserve's pumping money to save the banks. Why? Because the banks, whether they make loans or don't make loans, they need to make the loans in order to generate profit. Yet the right hand CFPB is saying, oh, well, we don't want you to do that. You know, go ahead, sell the paper. These left hand, right hand doesn't know what they're doing. Shut them both down. Problem solved. Then you simply say to the people that are manufacturing, building, doesn't matter who it is, you hold the paper. It's okay at that point. If you've got your own mortgage company, no problem, but you can't sell it into the public.
Good. That's really good. Yep. And portfolio, again, is holding the loan so that they can't sell it. And the thing is, guys, imagine this. If a lender has $100 million, but they lend $100 million, well, the next month they have no more money to lend. Right. So the premise is they have to keep getting in money and making their commission. But the reality is they're just screwing us and making things more expensive. Now, Mitch, I want to end us out here by talking about a solution. Now, and I have my own ideas here as being a lender for so long, but what type of solution is there for normal people? So if a normal person, and by the way, it's the worst time to buy a house pretty much in history right now. Like the math doesn't work for anyone for the most part. And but still someone wants to buy a house. They have their own reasons. And what would you recommend to them to avoid becoming someone that loses their house?
There's different stratas of income, right? So if it's a lower income person buying a house, but for extreme discount is probably off the table. If you're a mid-income, because that's what it really does come down to, right? It's a median household income. So if you're a mid-income, let's say mid-income at 60 to 70,000, probably still the same thing. This doesn't make any sense if you buy a new home. If you buy an older home, sub $80 a foot, $90 a foot, and that's something you can afford if your spouse does not lose a job, because there's a whole bunch of if criterias here. That becomes an issue. If you're a more affluent person and you say, okay, fine, I've got 130,000, 120,000, and I want to buy a home, you're still probably looking at, in reality, what should not exceed a $350,000 home to be on the safe side. So there's different stratas, and everybody's got to look at it. It's a tough answer, but right now, if you say I'm going to go buy a new home at these inflated prices, on land prices as inflated as they are, with grocery store costs not subsiding in the inflation costs, things are very abnormal in this market. And most people know, look, I'm a builder developer. I'm not building because I do not have clarity. All I see is labor problems. All I see are inflation problems. All I see are supply problems. And I can't afford on a big project. If you say, well, okay, I'm going to build a $50 million project and I can't get washers and dryers, even though GE says they can, but if I can't get washers and dryers on the day that I need them and I go to open up that property, I'm financially hurt. If I've got air conditioning units that I can't get my hands on when I'm ready to open up those units, then that property is financially hurt. Then you have the real estate taxes on top of it, which are straight up extortion. Well, why would I want to put myself or my investors, and frankly, it even backs up on my tenants, because what am I going to do? I'm going to say, well, I'm sorry, I can't open this unit this month because I don't have the parts. See, it touches everybody. The fraud touches everybody. And that's what you're looking at here with these banks. You're looking at this with Vanderbilt. Did they do the right thing on those particular files? Probably not. But to say that it's just going to affect those people, no, it's not. It's going to affect everybody. You're a shareholder, you're going to get hit.
I am so disappointed in banks, but, I would say to the viewers that are, whether it's now or 2, 3, 4 years from now, you're going to want to buy a house, you're going to want to get a mortgage. What I would say is, number one, you got to be patient. You cannot buy a house based on your emotion. I know how emotional it gets buying a house. People want to move on with their life and live that American dream of home ownership and have a white picket fence and that pride of owner. I get all that. But we got to redefine what a home really means and where our heart really is. So you got to be patient. You got to understand the math. And what do I mean by math? Take my course, you guys. It's for free. I've made it for you. It is in this description. And when I say understand the math, understand your mortgage, your payment, your amortization schedule, your property taxes, your homeowner's insurance, and probably one of the most important things, understand how comps work, comparable data, because those comps will tell you whether or not you're getting a good deal, a great deal, or a horribly overvalued property. So you got to use the math. You got to be patient. And another thing, okay, this is very important. You got to shop your mortgage. And generally, if you go through a broker versus a direct lender, generally, not all the time, generally, it's much more affordable and cheaper to go through a broker. But either way, you guys, we have seen time and time again that as consumers, that banks and the Federal Reserve do not have our best interest in mind when they conduct business and when they regulate. The regulation just goes, people just forget and they just change it, and it goes back into the hands of the banks. The banks continue to leverage, continue to be risky at our expense, and I, for one, am sick and tired of it all. Mitch, I want to give you the last words, man. Maybe you can breathe some hope into some people. I don't know, but the last words are yours, sir.
In 2007, in November, I remember the exact time, I was offered a loan portfolio of $756 million. And inside that loan portfolio were mortgage-backed securities, credit default loans, and subprime loans, and about $80 million worth of bonds. That was offered to me by the government. Okay? Now, the value was roughly 13 cents on the dollar. So all that money that people had invested, those were assets, those loans were basically packaged up by a division of the government, and they pushed it out on the market. But if you think about it, the face value of those loans, even at 100 cents, even if you said the face value was 95 cents, when it hit the street, got into my hands, it was around 13 cents. So all those people that touched that file lost. What's so interesting on that is that nobody would have lost if the banks held the paper.
Yep.
In other words, get the leverage out of the system, and the system tells the truth. It's the exact same thing. If you think about it, what do we have right now with the school districts? They won't give a bond schedule. They won't give a balance sheet with notes. They won't give us sources and uses, and that's straight across the United States. It's happening everywhere. Okay, they're bankrupt, but they still turn around and they say, give us more money. If you can't see it, they're hiding it. Give us more money. It's the definition of a Ponzi scheme. It's the exact same thing that happened in 2007. We'll pump this money into the system. People will get their share of the money. And at the tail end, if the banks don't do what they're supposed to do, no harm, no foul. Who's going to take the hit? The investors. Who are the investors? Mom and pop. That's exactly what you're seeing at Vanderbilt. It's identical.
Well, we're going to end on that note of hope. Sometimes it's not all hope, but you know, here's the thing. Part of surviving, right? Part of surviving and hedging and getting through this fairly decently is understanding. If you don't understand the possibilities of risk, then you're going to get swept in the wind, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, you're going to get swept up. But I want to have control over my life. Hopefully we're helping you guys understand what's really going on behind the scenes. And other than that, if you guys are out there just trying to live your life, if you're investing in real estate, the stock market, whatever it is, you guys already know, Mitch and I wish you luck, and we hope you win.